Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Rakdu Ridge, once again playing as the Lizardmen. This will hopefully be the last Lizardman match for a little bit. Hopefully you guys are not too sick of it at this point. But it is against Beastmen, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. So, going into this one, against Beastmen, I wasn't entirely sure what I even wanted to do. I knew that the biggest threats to my army would probably be Centaurs with throwing axes, and to a lesser extent Minotaurs with great weapons. So I kind of decided that we'll actually try to bring some Skink Chiefs. So what I did was I did bring double Skink Chief. I figured these guys would be pretty safe up in the air, unlike, for example, Skink Skirmishers who could get shut down by Centaurs or Hounds or that sort of stuff, which are pretty common. These guys would hold up hopefully much better and be able to chip away. And I knew that with each dart on these guys can one-shot Centaurs with throwing axes, so I figured, if we're wasting their ammo while chipping away at their models, we can make them a much less effective counter to big monsters like Lord Mazdamundi or my Horned Ones. So for the rest of the comp, not much to say. There's Lord Mazda, who is kitted out to the teeth. I did bring both of his bound spells, both Banishment as well as Ruination of Cities. I did bring Arcane and Forging to try some Lord Sniping and be a scumbag. Apotheosis, Curse of the Midnight Wind, Harmonic Convergence, and Net of Mintox, who were kitted out to the teeth. It's absolutely ridiculous. We also do have Sunbridge Stanley of Hexoatl for that extra melee defense as well as the missile resist. Being on Zlak, of course, Mazdamundi is no pushover in melee either. He can definitely lay the smack down his opponents, and pretty tanky against most Beastmen troops. For the rest of the comp, frontline, 3-star warriors, nothing too fancy. 4-star warriors with shields. They can soak up some missile fire. More importantly, they'll outtrade most with the Beastmen infantry, except Bestigors. But even against Bestigors with some debuffs from Mazdamundi, they'll do rather well. Bestigors don't have good melee defense. And Beastmen do have respectable melee defense of their own, so you can kind of trade okay if you're able to debuff the armor on the Bestigors. Behind that, 2 units of I almost called Skeleton Spears, sorry, Spears, to provide some additional anti-large support, and of course these guys will still trade okay against the lower-end Beastmen troops. And finally, 2 Horned Ones, because I've been having a lot of fun with these guys, and I figured, Beastmen are not very good against heavy cav, and these guys are a heavy cav for sure. They're just a rampaging heavy cav, so I figured if we're able to get a good engagement, we could definitely tear them to shreds. And Horde Ones I've been finding, nobody really expects them, but the dinos have a much more grind-oriented playstyle normally. Their infantry is much slower at doing damage. Their monsters don't actually do all that much damage in short bursts. It's more about slowly but surely wearing your opponent down. So opponents are much more prepared for that sort of playstyle than they are with Horned Ones or units like that, which can quickly lay a quick bursting attack and get out. So you can see immediately, my opponent here did bring a skirmishing force, some Centaurs throwing axes, as well as some poison warhounds, or actually just normal warhounds and poison warhounds. And so I'm going to simply fly around and chip away at them, waste their ammo, make them waste their ammo here. You can see, I'll try to fly around, trying to make sure they don't hit too often, and just letting my Skink Chiefs fire, and we're chipping these guys down. You can see every model we take off is potential DPS taken down, and that's pretty important, I think, and is going to help Mazdamundi in the long run. So what I did was I did shift my Horned Ones over here. The rest of my opponent's army, he did bring 2 Harpies, who are going to be a huge nuisance and are going to be a huge terror for my Skink Chiefs. Skink Chiefs are not great in melee. They're okay. Harpies are not great in melee either, but I don't have anything to support the Skink Chiefs. I didn't bring any ground shooting, which is in retrospect a mistake, because now I have no tools to support my Skink Chiefs. So although we were able to chip down these Centaurs, we were suddenly going to start taking fire from the Harpies, and if I let my micro down for just 1 second, I'm going to get caught. So what I should have done is I should have set these guys to skirmish mode and let them run away, but I do not, so we're actually going to get caught out there. For the rest of my opponent's army, he did bring a Cygor, or summon Cygor, because he's got a Bray Shaman over here, who does have, if we quickly gloss over, he's got the Devolve as well as Savage Dominion, but he didn't bring Jagged Dagger. This is a bit of a bad build in my opinion. If you're going for Savage Dominion, you shouldn't be investing in Devolve, I think, because Devolve's a very expensive spell. You should go for a cheaper secondary spell that helps you spam or like Break Scream, that lets you spam Bestial Surge. But for his front line, my opponent's going fairly cheap. Grower Herd, Black Orange Ravagers, a single unit of Bestigors, Kazrak One-Eye, a little bit of an interesting choice, who we are going to hit with Arcane and Forging, and then 2 Minotaurs with the Great Weapon, so heavy anti-large contingent, as well as Korok's Man Rippers in the back. So some nasty anti-large, definitely some nuisance, and definitely something we have to watch out for. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, we are actually going to get caught here by the Harpies, so huge problem, and taken down. And unfortunately, we're just not able to save our Skink Chief here, and it's unfortunate, it is what it is. But my opponent here, who committed both of his Harpies to that Skink Chief, is now going to allow my other Skink Chief to continue harassing his Centaurs. So a little bit of a win there for me, even though overall a loss. Now, here in the front line, Mazdamundi gets jumped by the Minotaurs with Great Weapons because I was bad at micro. and we're paying for it. The Star Spears here taking some meaty rock hits and losing a lot of HP. The Star Warriors over here getting hit by the Chaos Warrior on the poison, but we're going to be able to turn around and lay the smackdown on them. While elsewhere, you can see we do get a little bit of a ruination of cities. I probably should have just dropped in Bestigors over there, but we didn't. However, over here, we caught my opponent's Minotaurs with the Great Weapons out with our Horned Ones, and the Horned Ones just put these guys through the grinder. These Minotaurs with the Great Weapons completely routed, completely destroyed in a matter of seconds. The Horned Ones are just such a brutal unit. And now the Bestigors are in a bad spot here. They're surrounded, they're getting hit by Star Spears. Bit of a misplay, though, on my part. We do get rid of these Minotaurs, and we are going to get a nice little banishment here. Once again, I should have dropped it on the Korax Man-Rippers. But we do make a bit of a mismicro here with our Horned Ones, and rather than pulling out and then cycle charging in, we're kind of getting bogged down in a protracted fight against Bestigors. Certainly we'll still do well, but a bit of a waste. Definitely could have been done better. Unfortunately, my opponent, though, we do get into Cygor here. We're going to do some damage. We do drop a Harmonic Convergence on our Horned Ones, doing quite a bit of damage. And Mazda Mundi, although not doing amazing here, is definitely terror-routing some of these troops, and that means these Minotaurs are suddenly getting isolated and be in a very bad spot. Now, unfortunately for me, my opponent does get a Devolve off, so very fortunate for him, very bad for me. So definitely, well, I suppose I kind of bashed Devolve just a second ago, but it turned out to be kind of useful here. But with the Star Spears in there, with the normal Stars, they're just able to lay such a smack down these Minotaurs, start dragging them down because they're unsupported. And Mazda Mundi, he's kind of able to weave in and out of his troops, kind of able to avoid isolation. While up in the air, you can see these Centaurs who really need to be over here killing Mazda are still slowly but surely getting chipped down. So you can see, great job from the Skink Chief. They just did so much damage over time. These Centaurs have lost half their models over here, a few models over there, not able to hold up to that constant pressure. And the Skink Chief still has a lot of ammo. Had I been a little smarter about my build, had some tools to support him, we would have been in a much better spot. But unfortunately, I just wasn't that smart about my build. That said, in the pits here, my opponent gets immediate rear charge with his Hounds, but fortunately, of course, Mazda gets a charge into the Hounds and promptly routs them, so they're just going to run for dear life. Those little puppies don't want to stick around when a dino jumps on them. Elsewhere, the Horned Ones rampage, so, you know, that's their thing. They rampage. But we are able to drag this Cygor down, which is great. And we are able to rout the Stray Shamans. We get rid of him as well, and that's really good. The Bestigors, you know, they're getting some good charges in, but of course, Horned Ones are not pushovers in melee. They still do have splash attacks. They still have monsters damage output. And Bestigors, they are getting torn down slowly but surely. And we do get a rear charge with Star Spears, so suddenly this situation is not looking that good for the Bestigors. The Bestigors lose Primal Fury, which takes away their psychological immunity, and they're in a very grim spot, despite the fact that it looks so good for my opponent a mere second ago. Unfortunately for me, my opponent here does get my Star Warriors and the Spears caught out in a bit of a bad spot, and is able to finally catch my poor Skink Chief. But at the same time, we do get another Ruination. City's doing quite a bit of damage, and now I'm using Jabba the Hutt to go chasing after the Bray Shaman of the Wild, trying to take him offline, trying to get rid of him. You can see the Minotaurs here being, trying desperately to catch him, but he still has 2,800 HP. It looks like he's really bad on HP, but he's actually in a decent spot here. And these Minotaurs are just not able to catch him, and we are going to pull our Horned Ones here, are actually going to rampage off station and come charging into the Minotaurs, and that's going to be ideal. The Minotaurs are going to get taken to Pound Town, and with that, my opponent is going to lose his last efficient or flexible source of anti-large. I suppose he still does have the Centaurs, but they're fighting in a woods where they're not really able to hit, and that is wonderful for us. You can see the Minotaur there sent flying, as these axes kind of miss and whiff and flunk. Elsewhere, if you take an overarching look of the battlefield, you can see the balance of power is horribly out of my favor, and this is something. The Beastman balance of power still has not been fixed, in my opinion, because there's no reason why my opponent's balance of power should be this favorable. He's very low on ammo on the Centaurs. Jabba the Hutt is still on 2,000 HP, which compared to Khazrak with 1,600 is a huge advantage. These stars are still very high on HP. We still have a unit of Horned Ones. We still got a healthy unit of Spears. And my opponent has Harpies. He's got the Korax Man-Rippers. That's basically it. He's in a pretty horrible spot. But for some reason, the balance of power is way out of my league. I don't know why. Even with his Shaman routing, it's terrible. But we do get a banishment off, and it's going to melt. Just completely dumpsters these Korax Man-Rippers, and it really does a huge number on them. And of course, they can't heal, unlike some of my troops, who I can support with some of my own healing. These Korax Man-Rippers getting dragged down into the muck. They're down to 2,300 HP, getting really beaten down. Elsewhere, you know, Jabba the Hutt, he is going to dive into these Harpies and start laying the smackdown on them. He might not have the best survivability, but or might not have the best melee stats, but he can still do a lot of hurt, and these Harpies definitely can't win against Jabba, at least not any sensible time. Over here, the Horned Ones taking some nasty hits from the axes. But it does mean those axes are not going to Jabba, and Jabba still does have his Cold-Blooded, which I have not used this entire game because I've been trying to keep him alive. We do help his Fear and Terror. He's just going to break these Korax Man-Rippers. And suddenly my opponent's in a terrible spot because we're getting Horned Ones into the back of these Harpies. They're going to start routing. The Spears are going to come in. And Jabba, you know, he's still rampaging. He's hits himself with an apotheosis. He feels a lot better. Suddenly his HP is spiking back up. And these axes are suddenly out of ammo. They're down to one last round of ammo. and we still have a healthy unit of spears. And despite that, the mounts of power is still in the middle, and I don't understand how at this point, despite the fact that my opponent's out of ammo, despite the fact that I still have a terror-causing monster on the field, and a almost full health unit of Star Spears. Unfortunately, here, a bit of mismanagement. I sent the Horned Ones into the Centaurs, thinking this would be a more decisive win, but these guys are very low on HP, and these guys are actually fully fresh because of their trait. So our Horned Ones here are going to get pretty dumpstered. I should have hit him with a Harmonic Conversion sooner, but I did not, so they're going to get torn apart. Oh well, I played bad. What can you say? Not much to say there. But we are going to pull our Star Spears into the fight, who will be able to bog him down. And in the meantime, Jabba the Hutt is going to chase Lord Mazda, or Khazrak, off the field. Elsewhere, the Stars are going to route over here. These guys are also not really holding up very well. But, you know, if we can get rid of Khazrak, my opponent's leadership will be completely in the gutter. And we're able to get, you know, some reserve spears coming in. These Horned Ones still sticking around to the bitter end. Being Horned One, they still cause fear, which is useful against these Koroks Manrippers. They're down to 2 models, 75 kills. Great work. Over here, Mazdamundi getting surrounded, but we do hit him with an Apotheosis. Once again, he's healing himself up, actually healing faster than these guys can damage him. And this blob of troops is just not going to be able to hold up. Once these Koroks Manrippers are taken off the field, it's suddenly going to be a very bad situation for my opponent. The Horned Ones are able to pursue them. They're still on 2 models. They're still holding. They're still sticking around. And at this point, finally the balance of power shifts decisively out of my opponent's favor. The Spearmen are coming into the back of the Centaurs. My opponent's army is going to rout. So, a good game to my opponent. Very tight, very close, very odd balance of power. I don't really know where that came from, why it was so imbalanced, or why it was so horrible, but it is what it is. So quickly looking over what happened. Well, we got slaughtered in most ways. Most of my units got dumpstered. But it became a grind fest in which, you know, Lizardmen, they can attrition pretty well, and they've got Fear and Terror on their side. And my opponent didn't have the best grinding build in the long run either. A few things I would have done differently in retrospect. Probably dump a unit of Star Warriors. We didn't need 4 units of them. I could have dumped a unit of them and made room for 2 Skink Skirmishers, just a normal variant. That would have been all the difference in the world I needed to shut down my opponent's Harpies and protect my Skink Chiefs. And the Skink Chiefs did a great job at dealing with those Centaurs. Had those Skink Chiefs been allowed to do their work over the course of the game, they could have been a much more impactful unit. But because they were sort of slaughtered prematurely, especially the one of them, the other one did get 36 kills in there, but because of that, they ended up kind of, it kind of screwed me over a little bit into the late game, because those Centaurs did get some value eventually, when they finally did come back. And those Harpies, you know, they were... It ended up my opponent got some value out of his Harpies, which he might not have gotten otherwise. I don't... definitely a bit of a rough situation. A few other things worth noting, I think, is the fact that I engaged somewhat haphazardly. Some of my stars engaged while some of them were still dealing with hounds. I let Mazda take about 2,000 HP from Minotaur great weapon damage, which is terrible. It took forever to kill Khazrak or force him off, which I could have done a lot sooner probably had I put more effort into it. So a lot of different things I did wrong there. The Horned Ones did amazing. You can see these guys. One of them came with 1 chevron, and he gained 2. Both of them gained 2 chevrons over the course of the game. So really, despite the fact that their damage looks pretty low, it's important to keep in mind one of them tore down the Cygor essentially entirely. One of them, both of them together, I suppose, slaughtered the Minotaurs with the great weapons pretty decisively. And then the units managed to also slaughter the Bestigors and stick around to the bitter end and deal with enemy cav. And so they're a very potent unit. They are definitely a heavy cav. They're definitely a good tool. Unfortunately, their Rampage is a bit of a screw over, but otherwise, you know, they do well. Like I said, I think the biggest mistake here was just not having a anti-Harpy tool, or maybe not having anti-Harpy micro. Maybe my micro was just bad, which it is what it is. Maybe I should have cut a corner somewhere, dumped a spell. I didn't really use all my spells, so maybe I should have dumped a spell somewhere. And honestly, maybe just dump Arcane Unforging, because I didn't really use it. I used it on a Khazrak, but I could have just not used it. I could have dumped Arcane Unforging and then gotten Slippery on the Skink Chiefs, and that would have made him much more capable of evading the Harpies. I don't know. Regardless, good game to my opponent here. Once again, an unnamed fellow. Maybe it's even the same unnamed fellow we had before. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining and fun. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below to keep up with additional content. As usual, if you have any comments or criticism of your own, be sure to post that down below and I'll respond as soon as I am able. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.